Matt Walsh is wrong about aliens. I've said it before. I made an entire video about it, and I'm going to say it again. I'll continue to say it. And now, one of my favorite philosophers, a man named William Lane Craig, I think he's the 9th most, maybe the 10th most influential philosopher of the last 30 years. He jumps into the debate. Let's jump right into it.
Whether or not you think it's likely that there is life elsewhere in the universe is going to depend, I think, very largely on the philosophy you take toward the question of the origin of life. What I've found in my reading is that origin of life researchers tend to fall into two very broad camps, which can be called necessitists and contingentists. Necessitists hold that the origin of life is the inevitable product of physical and chemical laws. And that therefore, given the physical and chemical laws that control the universe, it's necessary in a nomological sense that life arise in the universe. A good representative of this philosophy would be Christian de Duve, who was a very prominent origin of life researcher who thought that the cosmos is pregnant with human life. It's embodied in its laws. On the other hand, contingentists say that given the laws of physics and chemistry, it's very likely that life would never have evolved anywhere in the cosmos. Rather, the existence of life depends upon a conspiracy of initial conditions that is so improbable that it's very unlikely to have occurred anywhere else in the observable universe.
Now, when you get to this level of scholarship, when you're talking about necessitists versus contingentists, you're talking about people who have very articulate reasons for taking their positions. But I'll tell you, the vast, vast, vast majority of people that I've come into contact with who believe in aliens do so, they're necessitists. And their entire reason for believing that that aliens are necessary is simply because the universe is big. That's it. The universe is massive. That's their whole line of reasoning. They then rarely ever try to balance it out with the chances of life spontaneously arising out of inorganic matter, and then multiplying that by the chances of the evolutionary process resulting in aliens, multiply that by the evolutionary process, the chances of that process then leading to something like civilization, and then multiply that by the chance of that civilization developing to the level of intelligence required to discover intergalactic space travel, and then multiply that by the chances that they were able to travel all the way to this Earth only to be discovered not by the 4K cameras that 6 billion people carry around in their pocket, but only and ever discovered on fuzzy, granular, low resolution thermal cameras present on Navy fighter jets.
If you're a necessitist, then you're going to be very interested in a very young discipline that's only existed since the 1990s called astrobiology. Astrobiology seeks to discover either traces of life or biological signatures of life in extraterrestrial sources like meteorites, lunar soil samples, samples from Mars, and so forth. So far, all of these attempts to find biological signatures have been disappointing. So the necessitist, I think, hasn't been very successful in establishing or supporting his claim that life is necessary.
Not only has he not been successful, I think that all the evidence runs contrary. And what you'll hear is the opposite of what I just said. Oh, new discovery shows that life is abundant or something like that. And what they're almost always pointing to is another discovery of another planet or Mars or something that has one more of the necessary conditions for life to have existed there. They're actually showing that the evidence that would show that life, is contingent on dozens of other parameters. They're simply trying to show that those other parameters are more common than we may think. But rarely at the pop science level do you get a serious, rigorous analysis of just how common they are and then multiplying them as independent probabilities with everything else. So for instance, there's some evidence that there was liquid water on Mars, but was it there present at a time with all the other factors needed for a long enough period of time for life to have evolved from nothing? Or rather, I should say, from inorganic matter. And the fact that we now live on a planet that is absolutely teeming with life, and yet we don't see abiogenesis. We don't see neobiogenesis. We don't see new life forming. We're living on the only planet that we've been able to discover that is clearly not only habitable, but conducive to life. So the fact that we don't see life originating brand new all the time, or even a few different times, radically decreases the chances of abiogenesis ever occurring, which inevitably turns to the fact that we have to ask the question, why are we here? I think what is clear and obvious and inescapable is the fact that there had to be some form of designer, which is why many atheist thinkers on this topic turn to this idea of panspermia, the idea that aliens seeded life here, because there just simply is very little reason to believe that it could have accidentally formed here. So it must have happened somewhere where we can't see it. That's what I call naturalism of the gaps. Just punt the problem way out into the galaxy, far, far away, a long, long time ago. The sort of Star Wars defense. Surely it happened somewhere, even if we can't statistically explain or mathematically explain how it happened here. So maybe it was brought here. Now, I think the most parsimonious answer is obviously God. The fact is, we have de facto proof of a creator, given not only the origin of the universe, but the origin of energy itself. Ignore the Big Bang Theory. There's always these monotonous debates over whether or not this model or that model best describes the data. The fact of the matter is, we have, in the first law of thermodynamics, proof that nature itself does not have the productive capacity to generate energy. And the second law of thermodynamics shows that we do not have infinite energy, which means that at some point in the past or in the present, energy is being or has been created. But that must be a supernatural cause because, again, nature doesn't have that capacity. And the fine-tuning is incredibly convincing that we have a designer of the universe. Fred Hoyle, who was once an atheist, became a deist based on the fine-tuning. He said that when you calculate out the numbers, it simply puts it beyond question. Somebody had to have a super intellect, he called it, must have monkeyed with nature's numbers in order to arrive at our existence. So once you have all of that, and then you look at all of the insane possibilities of even our existence, the implication is very clear. God wanted us to be here. And because of that, as a contingentist, I'm actually not hyper skeptical of the existence of aliens. I just know that it's not going to be through some random collision of atoms and ions in a primordial soup somewhere, because that is statistically so unlikely as to put it beyond question. So as a theist contingentist, I'm just simply looking at the data and saying, you know what? I think that there's really good reason that there could be life out there. I just don't see any evidence of it yet. And the grand story that the naturalist tells about, this abiogenesis on another planet, and then it evolved into the hyperintelligence that can fly here and not be detected by any of our radar, any of our sonar, any of our hyper accurate cameras, but can only be detected by our fuzziest and least defined cameras. That's the story that I find hyper implausible. But if we find evidence of other civilizations, I would have absolutely zero problem with their existence. It would just be further evidence that God paints with a large brush, that he himself loves life and therefore wanted to create it more broadly than simply this planet. That's it for today. Hopefully I've convinced you. And if I haven't, please leave me a 15-paragraph book-length comment down below. And if you are the kind of person who has not joined my Patreon yet, you're probably also the kind of person who unironically calls aliens the Greys. So, like, share, subscribe, do all the rest of the stuff. And until next time, trust God and keep your powder dry.